today's episode of the Retro Gamers Podcast, we react to LEGO's latest Nintendo set announcement. We discuss Dungeons and Dragons history in video games, and online dungeon master Adam Majka joins the show to chat about running online D&D campaigns. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Retro Gamers Podcast. Anthony here, and with me this week is actually going to be my special guest that I will be interviewing in the second half of the show, but he is also joining me for the entire show. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. It's about time that I get you on the podcast because we've known each other for a little while.
Oh yeah, just a bit.
Just a bit. So I think it's funny. Before we started recording, I was trying to figure it out, and just thinking back, it was just 18 years last month
Oh
that
wow.
that we had met. It was
Now
way
now I
back
feel
in.
old.
Well, I feel old too. It was way back in my it was like 1 month into my stint in Los Angeles that we met each other, and here we are, 18 years later now
Yep.
we'll be talking video games. So, how are you doing?
So I'm doing good.
Yeah.
Yeah, can't complain. It's
No.
been no. Good times.
All right. Well, just really quick, tell my listeners and viewers who you are, how we know each other.
Well, it was Adam. I met Anthony back in LA. We are both aspiring screenwriters, or at the time we're aspiring screenwriters.
Yes.
Um, and we got together and we were part of a writing group that still goes on to this very day. And we over the time we've become friends. We've shared the love of retro video gaming. So
Yep.
like this is another topic that we share to discuss and talk about all the time. And yeah, and now I work as a professional dungeon master or game master, depending on which game system you're talking about.
Which game system? All right, cool. And that's really awesome. And obviously like an added bonus for the show, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But yeah, like I just think about the history we've had just starting in like a little writers group, and then obviously like we've now both moved away from Los Angeles. We're both still
Yeah.
writing.
Hmm.
And like you said, it's like I value our friendship greatly. Dungeons and Dragons is one of those things, and that's what we're going to be talking about basically today. It's one of those things that I remember playing as a kid, but I left it somewhere in my teens. I think it was around high school. It's like because I remember playing it in grammar school with my friends, and then once everybody split off to high school, that's kind of where it started to fall off. And aside from and then the way that I got my fix with the D&D style was playing some of the video games.
Yep. I definitely played a lot of the D&D video games back in the day. I've been playing since I was 8 years old. I
Oh wow.
Yeah, I'm what some people would call a self-inflicted gamer. I went out and bought the big box set by myself, saved up my like my allowance, and me and my mom sat down and figured out how to play together, which is not a typical story of how
That's not
people
that.
start in D&D.
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
say that's not a family oriented game.
It is depending on, it was fun and she doesn't play with me still, but like I have three brothers, so we all started playing together and
Nice.
I've been playing ever since. So uh but yeah, the video games themselves, the old D&D video games are definitely there to scratch the itch, but they don't encapsulate the game itself. And now they've started to get closer and closer to the actual experience at the tabletop. But those
All right.
early games were definitely challenging.
Yes, they were. The ones that I did play, I do remember them being challenging. But with the tabletop version, did you start with second edition?
I started with what was called it's called Beck Me now. It's basic
Okay.
edition. They it was right before, it was around second edition, kind of ran parallel to it.
Yeah.
You had with Beck Me, it was you had basic, experienced, I want to say champion and immortal levels.
Hmm.
Um And it was like a progressive build of the rule set. Like you'd start off basic, which was real simplistic rules, and you keep adding tiers onto it. But that evolved into second, moving on to playing second edition,
Mhm.
and then just sticking with each edition as they came out. So,
All right, cool. All right. Well, we're gonna dive into that. We're gonna dive into a little bit of the actual tabletop D&D
mhm.
history, and then we're gonna talk about the video games in a minute. Before we get to that, because I'm already like jumping the gun here. Before we get to that, just a couple of other things I wanted to touch on, which is just as a
Mhm.
general gamer right
Yeah.
now, Adam, like what are you playing?
All sorts of things. As far as video game goes, it depends. I have two kids, and I am currently playing Mario Party Jamboree with them on
Nice.
a pretty regular basis. They love Rhythm Kitchen. Uh, a lot of get up off your seat and kind of jump around with the kids. Uh, on my own, I'm playing some older computer games like I think it's Hairbrain's BattleTech. I've been
Oh
playing.
wow, BattleTech. Okay.
Yeah, I just loaded up Dawn of War 40K as just kind of like to scratch a little bit of the nostalgic itch there.
All right.
Yeah.
And
But
you do
other than
you
that,
do you do a lot more PC gaming now, right?
uh it depends. Yeah, I do a lot more on the PC than the console, but I have a Switch and that's largely what if I'm doing a console, it's gonna be the
It's
Switch.
going to be the Switch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, like with Steam and the way like prices on PC games have just like they're always on sale. They're always ridiculously low.
Mhm.
It's so easy to build a library now on Steam. Like I have a huge
Yeah.
library of games on Steam that I don't touch. And I just keep
Yeah.
buying them and I'm like, "Oh my God, this is great." And it's only $3.
Yeah, and Humble Bundle doesn't help either because you end up getting like 10 games at one time and you're like, well, I'll get around to
Yeah.
it eventually.
Oh man, I bought on Humble Bundle like they had a board game collection
Mhm.
of like Arkham Asylum, and not Arkham Asylum, Arkham Horror. I'm thinking of
Yeah.
friggin' Batman.
Yeah.
Like Arkham Horror, Mysterium, like all of these games that I have the actual physical board games for. So I'm like, oh great, I have them on Steam and I'll play with other people. Nope, never do. And I have the
Yeah.
Steam Deck too. I have the Steam Deck hooked up to my TV upstairs so I can play and on my TV upstairs, and I'm still not doing it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
uh,
The one I've really enjoyed as far as board games go on Steam is it now it's kind of older. It's Armello. It
oh, I've never
was
played Armello.
it's a fun, it's a simple game to play, but if you were to play it on a tabletop, it'd be kind of really fiddly.
Hmm.
But it's a really fun, quick like board game where you're trying to uh win the throne of this kingdom before the king dies of this like
Hmm.
rot that is like causing him to turn evil. And it's very like it's fun. I highly recommend it if you haven't played it. I definitely
It does sound
recommend giving it
interesting
a
to me. I'm
shot.
sorry. Like every once in a while, you'll see me shift because I'm moving my cats.
No worries.
Yes, because naturally, when I start recording, they both show up in my office and they want my attention. So,
Yeah, that makes sense.
which is what it is. Okay, cool. So, yeah, and then gaming wise on my end, like what I'm playing right now, I think I had mentioned it on the last show, but I just started Final Fantasy VII Rebirth on PlayStation 5. And I know
Nice.
that's going to be a bear. I've been holding
Mhm.
off on it because I was so exhausted after finishing Tears of the Kingdom because I put like almost 200 hours into that thing that I needed a break before I broke out like another giant game. So I just started Rebirth, and I'm also, I think, two-thirds of the way through or three-quarters of the way through Echoes of Wisdom, Zelda Echoes of Wisdom on
Gotcha.
Switch, which has actually been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've almost 100% completed Tears of the Kingdom. I'm waiting till I get everything before I go and destroy uh Ganon
That's
at
what I
the end.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a great game. It's
Yeah.
such a great game. Really quickly, I wanted to jump into some retro news before we get to our full-blown topic. And I just have a few pieces I wanted to throw out there. One of them is about the Evercade. Now, I don't know if you know what the Evercade is. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's an awesome console. It was something that I bought Larry, I think, for Christmas one year, and I never wound up buying one for myself. And I regret it pretty much constantly that I don't have it in my collection. But they put out really good carts with like 6 or 8 games on them,
Hmm.
and and a good chunk of them are games that you can't get a hold of. She, there's my
Yeah.
cat wanting attention. Um, but there was an interesting just bit of news announced, unfortunately, due to rising costs of creating actual physical cartridges, which,
Hmm.
people are doing less and less these days. Blaze announced that they're increasing the prices for both new and existing Evercade cards. So it's going to be across the board. It's not, and to be honest with you, like even the price increase doesn't sound that bad. So like games that were originally $20 are going to be 25, or cartridges,
Hmm.
and carts that were originally 25 are going up to 30. But like I said, considering how many games you get on them, it's not the worst thing in the
Yeah,
world.
because you're getting like 8 to 10 games per cart, and a $5 increase still puts it well below any other modern system that's out there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
you're getting, you are getting retro games, but still like if you're averaging them out, it's like,
Hmm.
on one card it's like $3 or $4 a game, the other one's like $4 or $5 a game. To me, like that's still pretty solid.
Yeah.
Um, Especially when I love comparing it to Nintendo because like Nintendo like loves going into their old library and they'll be like, oh look, all these Wii U, like all the Wii U games nobody bought from us, we've now released on Switch and we're charging you full price for, even though they're like 10
Yeah.
years old.
And you're getting physical media. You're not
Yeah.
getting like the chance to play it as long as you're subscribed. You
No.
own that product at that point.
Exactly. And I am all about physical media. That's my thing. So yeah, so any Evercade players out there, there's going to be a slight price increase, but nothing absolute, nothing terrible. The other bit of news, a couple more that I have here. Lego, I feel like every week Lego is announcing some other big thing. And Lego
Yeah.
has worked with Nintendo before. They created the Lego NES set, which I actually have and put together. It's sitting on a shelf, actually not too far from me. It was super fun to put
Hmm.
together. But now they've announced they sent a teaser video out that Lego is now working with Nintendo on a Lego Game Boy set, and this one is slated to come out in October of this year. So the teaser looked really cool.
Hmm.
The thing about it though is that because the Game Boy, like the Game Boy's not, it wasn't a big system to begin with. So like I can't
Yeah.
imagine this being a big set.
It's all going to depend on how if they make like interchangeable screens or something. Because I know with
Yeah.
the NES, you got to build the screen image and stuff like that. If they,
Mhm.
maybe they'll give you other options there. But yeah, also, but I mean, like Lego, the sets don't have to be big. They have a lot of smaller sets,
True.
so it might actually be more cost effective than some of their other sets.
Yeah. Well, and maybe it's going to be more along the lines of like the Piranha Plant that they did, the Mario Yoshi one that they
Yeah.
did, where they're just smaller sets. You could be right on that front. I
Mhm.
It's just whenever I hear something about console, I'm immediately thinking, oh, this is going to be like a 200 and something dollar set.
Yeah, I mean, you're still probably paying $100 for it, but like,
Well, of
but it's
course
not
it's
gonna it's not gonna be a Deku tree from.
no. Oh my, I didn't buy that one, and I'm kicking myself. Like my biggest problem with Lego that I have is there are so many sets I want to buy. Like right now, my eye is laser focused on the X Mansion.
Ooh,
They released the X Mansion.
yeah.
It's $330, but I just keep staring at that thing, and I'm like, I want it, I want it, I want it. But I
Lego's
say
always a good investment, you know? It's always
it's a
like
good,
it's
but once you open it though, it's a good investment if you keep it close. It's like if I'm buying the X Mansion, I go, I'm building it and it's going on display. My problem is like, where am I going to put it? There's only so many places you can put these things.
yeah.
And I'm not
Rent
gonna,
a storage unit, just have them all spread out
yeah.
and you know,
And I'm
commit.
not, yeah, as I say, I'm not creating a Lego room in my house. I've already got essentially a video game room in my house, and that's more than enough.
Yeah. I hear
So,
you. Just
yeah,
need a
but
bigger house.
That's what it is. It's like I need a bigger house with like just a Lego wing that you can go to.
Exactly.
I'll make the room like I'll build the room out of Lego, like the walls and everything.
There you go. Get enough Lego, build this addition to your house out of Lego, and then
Hmm.
put your Legos in there.
Yeah, exactly. And you can only go in there, certain months out of the year. It'll be too
Yeah.
cold. All right. So yeah, so anybody out there who's interested in the Lego Game Boy, keep an eye out. October 2025. I'm sure they're going to put pre-orders up for that. All right. And the last one that I wanted to touch on, this one was really interesting to me because a fan, uh, clearly a DC fan, decided that he wanted to create his own, I want to say 16-bit style DC game. And he did it. He created a game called DC Task Force. We'll see how long this is up before they try and shut it down, even though it's free. It's a free download. It's called
Mhm.
DC Task Force. The name of the creator is Z Vitor, Zvitor. He created this game. Like I said, it looks like a 16-bit brawling type of game, kind of almost like Batman the Animated Series, like of that, or Spider-Man Maximum Carnage. It looks like it's in that vein, and it's a short game. The campaign can be completed in just about an hour. To explore everything is maybe about 7 hours. So for for what would be essentially a Super Nintendo game, that's not a bad amount of time.
Yeah.
However, in the game, there are 82 different characters you can choose from. So this guy created like every character you can think of that was in the Justice League, or just potentially like every character from DC, which is
Hmm.
crazy. I don't know. I don't know how much
Yeah.
you, I don't know if you, how much you looked at this.
Yeah, I
But
did. I was flipping through it. It's really cool. It reminded me of like the Avengers and the Infinity was it the Infinity Crusade or Infinity Crisis?
you're talking
Back
about Ultimate Alliance, the game, or the
there was no there was, they did it.
Infinity Gauntlet?
There was the it was a similar with the side scrolling beat 'em up, but you played as like Iron Man or and Captain
Oh,
America.
Marvel War of the Gems.
That was it, War of the Gems.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's what it looked a lot like to me, that kind of style.
Yes,
Um but yeah, just looking at the people I mean, there's a, Daffy Duck, Green Lantern
I saw that.
as a
I thought that
playable
was awesome.
character and stuff like that. There's a lot of niche characters in here.
Hmm.
And then, for good measure, he's got the Ninja Turtles and Dutch from Predator versus Alien.
Yeah,
And
which I absolutely love. Well, he also
yeah.
has Predator. Predator is a playable character.
Okay.
And then on top of that, for some odd reason, which I love, he put the mask, Jim Carrey's The Mask, in there as a
Yeah.
playable character. And I'm like, okay. I was like, you know what? When you're creating your own game, I guess you can just you put
I
whoever you want in there, you know?
That's the cool thing about it. You can make the games nowadays that you wanted when you were a kid. Like,
Exactly.
and that's super cool.
Yeah, and that's what drew my attention to this article, because I'm like, okay, this is a game I would definitely play, because like you said, it's very War of the Gems. Another one that just popped in my head, X-Men Mutant Apocalypse played the same way as War of the Gems did too. But yeah, just the idea, like you can play as everybody from Superman to Crypto. Crypto's in the game. You can be the dog. I mean, that's just cool.
I like how they
Uh,
have the Atom and he's tiny,
Oh yeah,
like
the
compared
Adam.
to everybody else.
Yes, I like it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
would love to see. I would love to run around the screen like is it the tiny little Adam. That's awesome. But
Yeah.
anyway, for any DC fans out there, or the style of game that we're talking about here, DC Task Force. Again, it's unofficial. Obviously, Warner Brothers has nothing to do with this, nor does DC. But it's a free download, and you can play it on Windows and Android. So head over to ZVTor's site. He's got other games that he's created before, and grab yourself a copy of DC Task Force and enjoy the free game. We're going to now jump into the topic we already started talking about a little bit earlier, but Dungeons and Dragons. And I thought what would be a good way to start before we get into the games is to actually talk a little bit about the history of
Mhm.
D&D. And since you are the D&D expert, I was a D&D expert way back when, but you are the current D&D expert. And actually, if you look over my right shoulder, you'll see I put out my books because
Yes.
I still have my second edition books there,
Very nice.
which makes me happy.
Yes,
And
those are very nostalgic books for me too. Like,
yeah, I'll never get rid of them. I will never
yeah.
get rid of them. But I know D&D started. Actually, it was funny. I thought D&D started in the late 70s. I didn't realize it started earlier than that. It started in 1974 officially.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, officially that's kind of when it starts, but like, when did it get popular was a little later.
Oh
Because
yeah.
really what it was a bunch of war gamers that
Hmm.
like were getting together and they wanted to add in wargaming you have these big armies and they have generals and stuff like that and they really wanted to try and tell the story of like a general instead of telling the story of the army. And it kind of evolved from that, where instead of playing 50 guys, you played one, and you would develop the story around that one character. And then Dave Arneson was came up with this concept of playing inside the story, playing inside a dungeon. Like they used to, I think if I remember right, they had like I really wish I could remember it. It was like Blackmore Keep or something like that, where they would go under the dungeon, and the whole idea was just to go under the keep and get to the lowest level you could without
Hmm.
dying and make it back out with your loot. And so, like
Okay.
the original concept was just the single dungeon you were going into to see who could get the most stuff out, and it was still like a competitive game amongst players and stuff like that. And at that time, being a dungeon master or a game master was you're a referee more than anything. You were just there to kind of make sure everything was fair and like
It kind of almost sounds like the board game Munchkin a little bit.
yes. But I mean Munchkin like evolves out of that like
I'm sure
concept.
it, no, no, I'm sure it did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. And so like early D&D was largely about like leveling up and getting loot. Like the more gold you got, that's how you leveled up. It
Hmm.
wasn't about experience points or anything like that. It was like the more gold you got, the more levels you would get. And then it kind of just spun out of control from there. They started adding classes to it that like before it was like fighting men and wizards, I think were the only two classes. And I think they had clerics, but I can't remember.
Okay.
This is all before my time still, because I was born in 79. So like, I was an
Right.
infant when these days were going on.
Oh
Um,
yeah, for sure.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the game rounded out before a little bit before both of our times.
Yeah.
At least the first, like the real, like the basic set first edition did.
And
Um,
then yeah, and then it picks up and like became what is now more of a story game combined with rules and yeah.
and
And
very
so
and very involved rules, let's say. Like you can, like I said, you can see the three books behind me, and
Mhm.
those are not thin books. And
Yes, but I will say this. I can sum up 98% of the rules in one statement. You roll a d20, which is a 20-sided dice,
yep,
and you roll high.
yep,
And that's it. 90, so at least in the current editions, that's the rule, is you're just trying to roll high on a d20. The DM will set you a difficulty, and if you roll over that, you've succeeded.
yep,
That's but and all that other stuff is combat. Like a good chunk
yeah,
of that book is combat rules that if you are role playing and doing just like skill challenges stuff like that, you don't even need really. And so, or you
yeah.
need eventually because you're eventually getting into combat because a good chunk of playing D&D is it's one of the pillars, as they say.
Yeah. Well, I remember like when I was playing and not DMing,
Hmm.
that like I always lean towards the wizard class or the cleric class and everything like that,
Hmm.
which is why like I always had my nose in the book because I needed to understand all the spells that I had.
Yeah.
And that was always the part where I was always like, wait a minute, it's like, what am I going to do next? Well, let me turn to my spell, let me look at my spells,
Hmm.
and then I got to
And,
go
and,
and turn
and
the page and find it. And
and when you talk about second edition, that was a big thing. Like second edition compared to now, second edition, the
yeah,
spells were a little more esoteric and like you could kind of, do different things with them. And what kind of happened when they shifted from like fourth edition kind of really tweaked it, but they started making the rules a little more algorithmic, where like you weren't like spells could do a specific thing. And so
Mhm.
you weren't sitting there contemplating like, oh, it's kind of vague. They made it very specific, like this does this, this does this, you know.
Yeah.
And but yeah, those earlier editions, it was a little more up to interpretation what you could actually
Mhm.
get done with your spells and stuff like that.
Yeah, I definitely remember that. And I also
Yeah.
remember a lot of arguments over what can and cannot be done because again, like the book only
Yeah.
told you so much and then everything really beyond that came down to the dungeon master wanting, making a decision on something and then the player obviously not if you're not happy with the
Yeah.
decision, arguing your case. It was a lot.
Eh,
There was a lot of that back then, even with these, even with how much information was in these books.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. You gotta trust your dungeon master to make a fair ruling and to keep the flow going.
Yeah, exactly, which
Yeah.
is cool. But yeah, so started in the 70s, Gary Gygax, obviously Dave Arneson, they were the originators of it.
Mhm.
And then the 80s is when I feel like it really started to take off and become popular. I know like that's when, obviously I got into it around like the mid 80s,
Mhm.
mid to late 80s. You got into it probably around the same time. Um, but what I found interesting because of the fantasy element of it, like the whole idea of like there's dragons, there's magic, there's obviously there's violence, there's all of these
Yeah.
things. I remember very, very clearly um all of the newscasts and all of the like I think it was all part of the satanic panic moment
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
80s where it was like this is corrupting our children. This is they're getting into occult stuff. They're worshiping
Mhm.
Satan because they're playing Dungeons and Dragons. Like I remember all
Yeah.
of that stuff.
Oh yeah. No, I mean I had friends that weren't allowed to play and stuff
Mm.
like that, and they'd get in trouble if they were seen with the books. Because I mean, like the original player's handbook had a big, well, actually the original Dungeon Master's Guide had a big red devil on it. The original
Yep.
player's handbook had like a red devil statue on it. Like
Mhm.
it did not look like a friendly book, but like anyone who ever read them would realize they were like more like really poorly written math books. Like it was not,
Yeah.
it was not nothing like the it was more the thought of what it was much worse than it was because anyone who was afraid that the devil was corrupting anyone playing D&D never sat in on a D&D session because
No,
like
they definitely did
no,
not.
bunch of people arguing over whether or not their roll was high enough while eating Cheetos and drinking Mountain Dew. Um,
Exactly.
but I did love the satanic. Like one of our favorites was I don't know if you've ever seen a Jack Chick track. That they used to hand them out. They were little like things that would warn you against sin that the church would hand out.
Oh, yes,
They
yes, yes.
made
I
one
remember
for D
this.
and D
Of
where
course.
that's where the term black leaf comes from and stuff like that, where it's all about this girl playing D&D and she gets kicked out of her group and she has to do horrible things because her character died. And it was
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Well, it's fun. It's funny you bring that up because like, but before we just started recording, I went on YouTube because YouTube you can find absolutely
Hmm.
everything, and I
Yeah.
found a couple of those newscasts with people who clearly either have no idea what the gaming is about.
Hmm.
They're just there, to spread the propaganda against D&D. And I wanted to
Yeah.
share a couple of them because
Uh-huh.
they're just too good not to look at. So I'm gonna throw those on there, and then I
Okay.
just want to get your reaction to them.
Okay.
You have eyewitnesses. For instance, one case, the parents were actually saw their child summon Dungeons and Dragons demons into his room before he killed himself. Another case, the kid thought he had the ability to astral travel coming from the Dungeons and Dragons game, that he could leave his body and come back. And he had rigged it up just according to the rule book so he could do it. He was surrounded by his materials and put a bullet in his head so he could leave his body, and he's never come back.
Kids are becoming acclimated to this very kind of thing, and I began to look through the instruction manual, and I see here how to cast magical spells and mage spells and cleric spells, and you go to the pages that it's listed on, in this instance page 41, and they have complete descriptions of how to cast spells and how to contact powerful spirits and how to use these spirits and these powers to overcome, obviously, evil or good, because there's both white and black magic in these books. We picked up another one to see if that was just coincidence, and it's dungeon magic here. And we look through again, and we see in here casting magic spells, page 22, with a complete description. And it says here, each wizard has mastered a certain type of magic. When you meet a wizard, he will give you 4 basic elements of his mystical studies. So we have a wizard now teaching the children of his magical studies. And then here it says, it is important to remember that the source of all magic is the life force of the user. This is the teaching of the occult. This is exactly what we were introduced into in Star Wars and E.T., that there is some magical power, some life force that runs throughout the universe, and it is this power that we can tap into for either good or evil.
I do not think that many parents are aware of what's inside the game. In fact, in my presentation, I show many pictures from the inside the books, just to show the images of this game. I mean, the gruesomeness of this game and the occult link to it.
Well, I know that when I did my message, and this has happened, I have letter after letter where people took the pieces. Now, there's 6s involved in the pieces of the game, but they'd take the pieces of the game, they would throw them in the incinerator or the fireplace, and screams would come out because there seemed to be some kind of spiritual forces inhabiting those pieces, and children would drop out of life. They didn't want to study anymore. What are the pieces, for instance?
Well, this game affects the most intelligent of our children. And the pieces include white witches, wizards, necromancers, the clerics, that type of thing. It includes evil wizards. It's a white versus black witchcraft. The good versus evil is white versus black witchcraft. And Anton LaVey, the writer of the Satanist Bible, says there is no such thing as white witchcraft.
Well, being a Satan worshiper, he should know.
Yeah.
So that was just a sample of stuff that you would see on the news, or just video, things that were getting passed around or shared, like in church groups and places like that, where it was like literally like your children are being corrupted by Satan.
Yeah, I'll say if my books and dice would scream if I threw them into a fire, I wouldn't have any, because as a kid I would have just been throwing my stuff just to listen to, like, it would have been a cooler thing to see. Like, oh, my D&D book screams when I throw it in the fire. I'm like,
Oh yeah, that would be the coolest thing ever, right?
yeah, I mean, as a kid, that would be like something like you would totally do.
And well, that would also be something like you would show, like I would be like, Dad, watch this, and I just like right in front of him.
Yes. Well, that's like I like my son used to be afraid that like a monster would get him at night, and I would tell him straight up, like, if a monster comes, yell really loud because we'll catch him and make millions of dollars because we'll have caught a real monster.
Yes.
And like, stuff like that. Like, it's one of those things that it's so ridiculous that like I don't know how people can believe that or even believe it. And
Well, they
compared to
did.
like actually watching now, and now people have seen what a D&D game looks like because we have shows like Community and Stranger Things and stuff
Yep.
that have shown the realities of the dark arts that is D&D, and it's not
Yeah.
it's just fun.
Yeah.
Like
It's just another. It's literally like the term. It's a game, right?
yeah,
It's a role
it's
playing
it's a
game,
game. Yes.
and it's a way for it's been a way for kids, and now obviously kids and adults, to access a part of their imagination and create a world and create a story, and then explore that world and that story. And and again, for something that's been around now for almost, well, now 2024, it was the 50th anniversary. So this
Yeah.
has been around now for 50 solid years. And obviously, it's gone through, like you said, it's gone through revisions. They've simplified things and everything like that.
Yeah.
But I think when I was reading it, there's still somewhere around, like, I want to say like 15 to 20 million people just in the US alone that play
Yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons, which is astounding.
Yeah, and there's only 3 DMs.
And there's only
Like
right. There's only 3D. Well, that's because I retired a long time ago. Otherwise, you would have 4.
Yeah.
But
But like you said, like as a kid, one of the things that was great about it was like I used to, you play video games. We were raised during the Nintendo boom. We played games like Final Fantasy and Zelda and all that.
Yep.
And like we wanted more. And the cool thing about D&D at the time was like you didn't need to learn how to code or have millions of
Nope.
like millions of dollars to put into like creating a game. You could just take your imagination, some dice and a pencil, and you could make your own games, and you'd be
Yeah.
playing games for hours and hours. Like,
Yeah. And not only that, you get to create your own character. You're not handed a character. You know what I mean? It's like
yeah,
you make the person the way that you want to be. The way that you want to portray them, whatever that may be.
exactly.
Yeah, and one of the things I wanted to share this because I actually pulled this out. This was my old D&D notebook.
Oh, nice.
You can see my name on it and everything. I have no idea. This thing is at least 30 years old, but I do remember, like, 35 years old now. But this was when I was dungeon master and I loved building dungeons. I don't know, like, if you can see that.
Nice. Yes, I
This
have. I had so many notebooks like that as a kid as well. That was so cool. Like, yeah,
This
building
this was one of my
mazes.
this was one of my favorite things to do. I would sit and for hours just draw dungeons, and I could not wait to create stories for people to play through with them. One
Nice.
time I had created a board. I remember it was like 8 feet long on the floor, and I had drawn like the rooms out on the floor so we could
Yeah.
move our miniatures around. I mean, it was just so much fun, and it was so
Yeah.
creative, and I absolutely loved it. And like I said, the fact that it's been going on for 50 plus years just
Yeah.
it just says a lot. It's like
I
people love being creative.
Yeah,
It's just
and
another
and
form.
I love like how it's evolved over the years. Like it's not like when we were younger, it was kind of a thing you hid. You didn't tell people you played D&D because it was
Right.
because either A, the
Nerd.
parent you were a nerd, or B, the parents were going to tell you you're going down below because you're playing it,
That's
you
right.
know. And now it's so accepted that there's TV shows you can watch all day about it. Like you can
Movies.
spend you can do nothing but watch D&D content for the rest of your
Mhm.
life and probably still not see all of it that's out there now.
Yeah, exactly. Or anything fantasy related. It's like some of the most, like, one of the most decorated films, Oscar winning films in history is now, Lord of the Rings,
Hmm.
The Return of the
Yeah.
King. I think it may still be tied for winning the most Oscars. I think Titanic is the other movie it's tied with, if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, because I know it's felt like they saved them all for the last installment of the series. So
Yeah.
like, but
Because
yeah.
they kind of treated it like one really long
Yeah.
movie, like one epically long movie, which to be honest with you is phenomenal. But again, it just
Mhm.
shows you, like, the staying power of,
Oh yeah.
fantasy element, the fantasy genre overall.
Yeah.
And then there was actually back then in the 80s, there was a Dungeons and Dragons cartoon that was
Mhm.
out for a
Yeah.
year. We got not too long ago a Dungeons and Dragons movie with Chris Pine.
Yeah, it's more like I think it was like the fifth movie they tried to make, and it was the
Well, it was the
first
fifth
one
one,
that
yes.
was the first one that had like a well, they I wouldn't say the first one that had a big budget, but it was the first one that I think saw commercial success. Maybe I don't even know. I don't know
Not enough. No, not enough because they didn't
because
greenlight a second.
yeah, they had the OGL scandal during that time and just kind of
Yeah,
did some problems with it, but it was definitely better than some of the earlier attempts and kind of more encapsulated the game,
yeah.
I
It.
felt.
I agree with that, but I will say, I remember one of the first DVDs I actually purchased
Uh-huh.
was the Dungeons and Dragons movie that was done in the late '90s with Marlon Wayans.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And
Snails, man. The
Nails.
snails.
I watched that movie so many times because it was like, again, in the '90s, I'm watching a movie based on Dungeons and Dragons. I was just
Yeah, no,
excited. I was just excited
I,
to get that.
100%. I,
Yeah,
I, I, I tried really hard to like love that movie.
I know.
And
Unfortunately, the lead of the wait was Jeremy Irons was in it too.
Jeremy Irons is required to be in any movie with a dragon, so he was
That's
of
right.
course
So
in.
yeah, he was the
Yeah.
he was the villain in the movie, and then the actual lead of the film. I don't remember the actor's name. All I remember is that he played the lead. He played Andy in Child's Play 3 when he goes
Yes.
to military school.
Yeah.
That I don't remember his name, but I just remember I was like, oh wait, I go, that's Andy from Child's Play 3.
Yes. That
All
I
right.
do remember.
All right. Well, that was our not so brief history on the actual Dungeons and Dragons game.
Yes, and that's
Uh
just like the history. We didn't even get up to modern times.
no,
So
no, no. We just wanted to touch on it a little bit.
yeah.
But now let's switch over to the video game aspect of
Yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons. And now there are a lot of Dungeons and Dragons type of games, but there
Hmm.
are there are a good number of them that actually are based off of Dungeons and Dragons itself.
Yeah.
So just in terms of those games, like I'll be honest, like I can name a number of fantasy style games that I've played and absolutely loved. When it comes under
Mhm.
the Dungeons and Dragons banner, I'm actually very limited in what I have played.
Gotcha.
So, in terms of like your experience with the actual video games,
Uh,
where did you fall with those?
I early on I was playing them all the time. Like with D&D games, there was like the engines that ran them kind of dictated them. Like the originals were like the gold box edition games
Yep.
where they were like I mean those were for like the early like MS-DOS. Like I was playing those on like a 486 like and stuff like that. Um and those were like really just like kind of reminiscent if I'm remembering right because it's been such a long time since I played them. Like I know I played Pool of Radiance
Oh yeah.
uh earlier on and stuff like that. If I remember they were more like in the style similar of like the Maze Crawler kind of like Fantasy Star level where you're making your way
That
through
first person
3D.
perspective.
Yeah, that first person through the 3D maze kind of
Yep.
situation if I remember right.
Yep.
Um and I mean, those were just brutal. Like,
Yeah.
you needed to optimize your group so hard to just make it through. If I like, th those I just remember. It also could have been because I was much younger at the time playing them that
Yep.
they were just like, I don't think I've ever
Yeah.
saw the end of any of those.
Well, games back then also like they always upped the difficulty level of
Mhm.
games back then because games were generally shorter. So if they didn't make them really hard, you would get through them really quickly and then it's just like, oh, well, that's it.
Yeah,
There goes $50, you know?
yeah. I know. Yeah, so the difficulty curve has definitely changed over the
Yeah.
years.
But yeah, Pool of Radiance is one of the ones that I remember also. And I remember, and the reason why I remember it is because there was an NES version. Because back
Mhm.
in the late 80s, the only, the only, the only PC I had was a Commodore 64. So if I didn't
Gotcha.
get it on Commodore 64, it wasn't
Mhm.
happening. And
Gotcha.
I don't remember ever having a Dungeons and Dragons game on my Commodore. Um, so Pool of Radiance, I remember
Yeah.
renting it on the NES.
Gotcha. Yeah, the one I really played a lot in that era was Unlimited Adventures. That was the one
Okay.
I loved because it lets you build your own game in it. Like you could
Uh,
build your own dungeon, you could put your text boxes in there and stuff like that.
oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it was neat. It was like it was one of the first kind of games where you could actually do
Mm.
that. I mean, there was other like create your own level type games, but that one was fun because it let you fill it with the monsters you wanted and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, I remember like spending hours just building things that, you know, I'd force my brothers to run through. And
Well,
then,
see, and that was early Adam being the
yeah.
dungeon master.
Oh yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You built it for them to watch your brothers die, to watch your brothers
Exactly.
die in the
Well,
game.
yes, because it was all about how many big monsters can you put in one room together and make it impossible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That I mean that yeah, that's all part of the fun. Yeah, Unlimited Adventures I definitely did not play. I know
Yeah.
that because that was a DOS based one, but
Yeah, that was solely for the computer. And then they brought up like Baldur's Gate and stuff like that.
yes.
Icewind Dale. Trying to think of
That
those. I think
that's when they were really starting to pick up in Windows. Like when Windows came out,
mhm.
because there were a ton of games in DOS. There were,
Yeah.
but when Windows came out, all of a sudden you were getting like a bigger game.
Mhm.
The graphics were obviously far superior to the MS-DOS versions. You were starting to get that isometric view of
Yeah.
gameplay.
Yeah, and it was cool because it was more like looking at the tabletop. I mean, it tried to do it real time, so really you had to
Mhm.
hit the space bar to pause it every five
Yes.
seconds to like redo all your moves and unpause it. And it was kind of like a stutter step, set up your thing and let
Yes.
it run and hope for the best. And it was a lot of you know, try and die where you'd walk into a room and you're like, oh, uh-oh, this is not where I need because you instantly like trigger 15 bad guys and
Yep.
learn you need to creep in and take out these two guys and then walk slowly in and take out the next two guys. It, they were definitely challenging. And they've remade all of those now too. Like I know they've
Yes.
remastered the Baldur's Gates and the Icewind Dales. And you can get all those because now Baldur's Gate 3 which is a completely different game than those, but
Oh
like,
yeah, it
yeah,
absolutely is. I
but
haven't
is
bought
reminiscent.
Yeah, I haven't bought three yet, but I remember the original Baldur's Gate because I bought it for my PC at the time. I don't remember if it ran on Windows 95 or 98, but I definitely had it for my PC.
Mhm.
And I'm actually very surprised because I still have, I actually have it sitting here because right next to me is a Windows 98 PC I bought a couple of
Yeah.
years ago. But I have my Case Logic, which contains all of my PC games from the 90s and then on. You'll see and you'll see like copies of stuff and whatnot. Like here's my roller
Nice.
coaster type and stuff. But the one game that's missing in here is my Baldur's Gate game. I have no idea what happened to it. And it was the
Oh
one game that
gosh.
I remember I kept in the original packaging because it was like, I forget
It
how
was
many discs
three
it
or
was.
four discs,
It
if I
was three
remember
or four
right. Yeah.
discs. And it's funny because like I would like because I remember having the booklet and everything and it's all gone. And it's one of those things where it's like, I want to get that back in my collection. I'm probably just gonna have to eBay it and make sure and hopefully it's not like $1,000. But
Yeah, when it comes to complete sets like that, it might be up there. But good
yeah.
old games, I know has it.
Well, and see, and that's all that matters at the end of the
Yeah.
day. But I remember playing a good chunk of the first Baldur's Gate game. I definitely did not finish it, but I remember playing a
Mhm.
good chunk of it, and I always marveled at the fact of how much was in the world. Like it
Yeah.
really, that was the first game I think I really played. First video game that I played where I actually felt like I was playing Dungeons and Dragons again with my
Hmm.
friends.
Yeah.
Granted, I was alone and sad playing it on my computer screen, but just to give that sense again, it was actually the first time
Mhm.
where I'm like, oh, like you said, like they're finally starting to capture that real feeling of playing the game.
Yeah, you're actually moving guys around as opposed to just watching the stats tick down on the side of the screen as,
Exactly.
little icons flash in front of you.
Yeah. And then and then after Baldur's Gate for me, the next one that I remember very, very, very famously, because I've talked about it
Mhm.
on the podcast before,
Yeah.
was Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. Um, that one was specifically console made. It was
Hmm.
on PS2, Xbox, game and GameCube, and I think there was a Game Boy Advance version. And this is when it started to just become more of a hack and slash game. It
Hmm.
was less RPG, it was more hack and slash. And the reason why I remember this one is because this was when I had first moved out of my mom's home, my parents' house,
Hmm.
and I moved into an apartment with a friend of mine. And I bought Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, and he also liked playing games. And I said, "Oh, hey," I was like, do you want to play this? Because it was a co-op game,
Hmm.
couch co-op for people who don't know that's how we used to play video games. There was no we didn't go online to play with each other. We actually had to sit next to each other with a controller in hand. And we played all the way through Dark Alliance over however long it took us, a month, 2 months, whatever it was. And then we got to the end of the game, and it's entirely possible that how games have multiple endings depending on how well you did.
Yeah.
We If this game had multiple endings, we clearly got the worst one because like we get to the end of the game where like we beat the last guy, we walk through a door, and then
Yeah.
just a bunch of text comes up on the screen that basically just says stay tuned for for the sequel or something like that. And we just both looked at each other and we were like, this was a gigantic waste of time.
Yeah. Oh wow. Like, yeah, nothing like the end credits giving you an ad for the next game. Like,
Yeah, but there wasn't even like an end, there was no end animation or sequence or anything.
mhm.
We literally took our characters, walked through a door, and just got a black screen with text that told us
Wow.
the story will continue. And we were just like, well, I go, that's garbage.
Oh wow. That
Yeah,
yeah, that is not a good ending for a game.
no,
It's
they
stay
did
tuned
make
for more exciting
yeah,
adventures.
and they did make a sequel to it. They made Dark Alliance 2, which came out
Uh-huh.
on PS2 and Xbox. At that point, like I wasn't roommates with him anymore, but
Yeah.
there was no way I was going to go back to that
Uh-huh.
after the experience I had in that
Oh
one.
yeah. Yeah.
I was like, oh, done with that.
Yeah, nothing's worse than like a letdown ending, especially
Yeah,
after you spend so much time
yeah.
and effort. And
But
like,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh no, I mean like as far as console goes, I mean I know Genesis had a couple tries at it, but they were way different than what D&D was. Like they were I'm trying to remember like they had
Yeah, like I'm looking at a
Warriors of the
list.
Eternal Sun was one.
Yeah, I'm looking at a list
Yeah.
of games online that are, Yeah, Warriors of the Eternal Sun was on Genesis.
Yeah.
Um, they actually had two on the Sega Saturn that were also just based off the arcade, and they were more
Yeah.
hack and slash. Tower of Doom, Shadow of Mystara.
Which are great games if you want to just play a hack and slash, like,
Mhm.
you know, beat 'em up side scroller.
Yeah. Well, I think, I think there's a play, at least in video game wise, I think there's a
Mhm.
place for the hack and slash versions because for people who enjoy the world but don't
Yeah.
want to get into the detail of an RPG, that, your hack and
Yeah. Oh
slashes are the way to
yeah.
go,
Yeah, I mean that's like that niche for Diablo, where it's like how many
Yes.
times do you want to click your mouse and then collect the loot and just keep upgrading? And I'm sure I've offended somebody who's like really into the strategy of Diablo, but when I play, it was all just click, 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 click until and hope for the best. Um,
You, you know what? People have thick skin out there. I'm sure that they'll be fine with that.
but yeah, I stopped with Diablo too, so I mean I'm sure
Mhm.
it might have evolved since then.
It might have. I forget which Diablo I played. I think I played some of three on my PS4, I want to say, but I didn't get all the
Mhm.
way through it.
Gotcha.
I was just like,
I mean,
it's fine. I didn't have
it
an
was
issue with it. It just
no, it was fun.
yeah,
It's good for what it is.
yeah. One of the things I wanted to talk about here also, like, because
Hmm.
like I said, like I'm looking at a list online. This is just the standard Wikipedia list of Dungeons and Dragons games.
Hmm.
I marvel at the fact that so many of them, and I guess this was just because this was the dominant story at the time, so many of them fell into the Forgotten Realms world.
Yeah,
And I,
that
I wanted your take on that.
I think a lot of them ended up in Forgotten Realms because Forgotten Realms compared to some of the other settings was very Tolkien-esque. Like it was very like
I was gonna
this
say, can you
is
explain Forgotten Realms a little bit?
uh I can it was the most like basic fantasy kind of setting. You know, you had
Hmm.
all the core races there, the elves, the dwarves, the halflings. The elves were magical mystical beings.
Hmm.
Everyone kind of fit in their niche just right. And it was huge. So like
Yes.
anything you wanted to do could fit somewhere in the Forgotten Realms. And that's largely, I believe, why it's their core setting.
Mhm.
And also there is no overarching story that dictates how the game should be played. Like they have settings like Dark Sun, where it's
Oh,
the
I remember
world has
Dark
been
Sun.
drained by evil magic to the point where like it's like kind of a Mad Max world where any
Mhm.
use of magic sucks life force out of the planet and stuff like that. And it's just this dark and gladiatorial kind of world. So like that's not going to fit your, got
Hmm.
to get the ring to Mount Doom's kind of story.
Right.
Uh, and all the other like Greyhawk is another one that's very kind of fantasy uh agnostic as well. But it has its own things. Dragonlance has its own
That's the other one I
overarching story.
remember.
Yeah, I mean that has
Dragonlance
its
was the other one I
overarching
remember.
story with the dragons and stuff like that.
Yep.
So like the thing about Forgotten Realms is you can fit a lot into it, and I think that's why
Mhm.
they really tied a lot of the to that is
Got it.
because there's just a lot of room to work within. And
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's more. Yeah. It's got a limitless feel to it, whereas the other ones are bogged down. Kind of like what you were
yeah.
saying with the actual Dungeons and Dragons. Like the second edition is
Mhm.
so like heavy-handed in terms of what you follow, whereas like fast forward to the fourth edition or fifth edition today, I think we have four or
It's
five.
well, they're now on they've just released another edition,
Okay.
which some people
So
call 6, 5.5, but really it's just
right.
their online edition that they're going to update for all
Yeah.
eternity.
But right, but like the
Yeah.
fifth edition now, like they've kind of like how they've simplified it all. So
Yeah, they've kind of taken there was a lot of backlash with fourth because what they did, it felt like to a lot of players, is they took a lot of cues from video games
mhm.
and kind of led from that foot.
Okay.
And then fifth edition was kind of a course correct where they're like, okay, we took these lessons from fourth and now we kind of take some lessons from second and we kind of made a happy medium. And that's really, I think, why fifth edition really was appealing to a lot of players is because whatever edition you liked, it kind of had something for you, but it made it very like algorithmic where you were there wasn't a lot of questions to the rules because the rules were very straightforward.
Got it. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. That analogy may or may not have hit. I'm not sure which or that I was trying to make. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, just a couple other games to throw out there that I personally remember. And again, a lot of them like I remember more on the NES. And
Mhm.
this is why Dragonlance was the only other one that I personally remember
Yeah.
outside of Forgotten Realms was that on NES you had two games. You had Heroes of the Lance and you had Dragons of Flame. And those were
Mhm.
based in the Dragonlance series. And I remember
Yeah.
playing those a little less RPG, a little more action oriented.
Mhm.
But I just remember having
Yeah.
fun with them.
Yeah. And with any game, that's the important thing. Like
Exactly.
and that's really it. Is that's why I think one of the reasons why D&D has never been usurped by video games. There's always a room for the tabletop because video games can't do what the tabletop does. Like,
Right. So in terms of the video games,
mhm.
if you had to pick one out of all of the ones you've played that are D&D based, like which one would you say is your favorite?
Ooh. Uh, that's a hard one because
Like if I told you to go back and play one, what's the first one you're gonna run back to?
oh I would probably go back to Baldur's Gate. Baldur's Gate. Either Baldur's Gate or Icewind Dale. That era I think is more where like I was playing D&D video games the most.
Okay.
And so in my mind, Baldur's Gate 3, I would love to say Baldur's Gate 3, but I've only played like 10 minutes of it because I am way too busy. I made a character. He's
Nice. Congrats.
standing there. Yeah. That
He's standing there
and
waiting to be played.
waiting to be played.
Nice.
So that maybe that'll be the game I say I would go back to. But right now
All right.
I would go back to the earlier Baldur's Gate games, stuff like that.
Got it. Well, you know what? We're in sync there because that's the one I would go back to. It's the reason why I mentioned before, like I would love to get the original back in my collection because that if I had to pick one to go back to, it would be Baldur's Gate on my PC.
Yeah.
That was just an
Very
awesome game.
nostalgic.
Yeah. And for everybody else out there who's listening and watching, like, if you've played Dungeons and Dragons games, would love to hear from you. Just comment on the wherever you listen to podcasts, wherever you watch, just give it, put a comment down, let us know what you think about the game. Maybe you don't like any of them. I would just love to hear your thoughts on that. For now, when we come back, Adam's gonna stick around because we're actually gonna talk about how he is a full-time dungeon master. The Retro Gamers podcast is brought to you by Old School Gamer magazine. Sign up for as little as $20 per year for 6 issues that include feature articles, interviews with retro programmers, new and old product reviews, and more. If you look carefully, you'll even see an article or two penned by yours truly. You can head over to oldschoolgamermagazine.com/retrogamerspodcast and sign up so they know where you heard about it. Old School Gamer is dedicated to you, the old school retro gamers from the arcades to your home. All right, welcome back to the show. And as you can see, Adam is still here with me because we're actually going to get to the interview portion that I've been wanting to get to and I've been meaning to get to. So, Adam, you are now a full-time professional
I'm
dungeon master,
yes, I'm a full-time
and
professional dungeon master.
yeah, and I'm really curious to hear about how you got into that.
Uh, well, there's a couple ways. Well, with my son, we homeschool him. He is, we're doing the homeschooling thing, and with homeschooling, you end up in a lot of homeschooling communities and co-ops and discussion groups. And one of the things that a lot of these groups were missing was some way to like some social way to socialize with other virtual students and stuff like that. And so I threw out the idea of running a D&D game for them. Uh, we already had a home game. My son's been playing for a very long time. And once that game got started, word of mouth just started to spread that I run D&D, and D, and people would reach out to me and ask, "Hey, are you have availability for another game?" And it just kind of snowballed from there. I run about 7 or 8 regular games a week now, and that it's become a full-time gig. I run for adults and I run for kids. Mostly, I'm running mostly for kids, which is an experience in itself. But it's fun. It's nothing I thought I'd ever be doing as my day to day, and I can't complain. It is definitely one of the best ways to spend my time rather than going into an office.
Well, yeah, like I mean, because
Yeah.
you're actually you're doing something that you've been doing your entire life that you love to
Mhm.
do, and it's fun.
Yeah, it's great. And watching the kids are super creative with it. Like, when I run for adults, they're kind of stuck in their mentality, but kids, like, they're the ones that always come up with the most surprising strategies of things they want to
Mm.
do. And they take the story in directions you're like, "Oh, well, let's roll with it and see where this goes." And it gets really fun and really interesting. And I have a couple kids too that are asking me to teach them how to DM, and they DM for their families and stuff like that. And that's
Oh,
the
wow.
greatest thing in the world. It's like having inspired someone to, go out and take up the mantle for the next generation and stuff like that.
That's really
Oh.
awesome. Now,
Yeah.
one thing I was wondering, because I know with the pandemic, when the
Mhm.
pandemic hit and everything like that, and obviously we were all like cordoned off
Yeah.
in our homes and stuff like that. Do you think that had anything to do with the rise of how D&D has risen over the last few years and how you like coming upon
I
being
think
a
I think
DM?
it's I think it definitely has a big part to do with it. I think like people were looking for, entertainment and they were looking for ways to interact over Zoom and other things. And it's easy and simple. And once you start doing it, you realize that like you don't need a bunch of new shows to entertain you. You can make your own stuff, and and I think the pandemic like made people kind of become very introspective about like how they spend their time and and finding ways to interact with people in a way that was safe and convenient. Like I, pre-pandemic, would run games at my table and stuff like that, and game stores and stuff like that. But running over Zoom is so much more convenient in so many ways. Like instead of having to travel, you just turn your computer on, you're there, everyone's ready to go. You have online tools to use and stuff like that. So I think the pandemic really developed Zoom in a way too, where everyone has Zoom now. Before that, you had Zoom if you were in that kind of office environment where like you needed
Yep.
it to have a meeting with somebody in a distant office, but it has become so ubiquitous to do virtual meetings and stuff like that that
Well,
it
here
is
here we are doing one right now.
exactly like the gaps between people are like I remember when I moved to LA all those years ago, 18 years ago apparently, or 19 years ago or whatever. uh trying to play D&D with my old group and struggling with it because like there was no real good technology to do it with. I was into film, so I could set up a video stream and stuff like that. And, but it was still so laggy and bandwidth wasn't there. But now,
Yep.
like, if I want to get together with my buddies all over the world, I play with people in every time zone. I have players in New Zealand, Australia,
Oh,
Canada.
wow.
I it's it's great. It's like and it's super easy and convenient, and I don't have to explain to anyone how to get on. You click a link and you're boom, you're there. It and so I think that more than anything has made it really easy and accessible to find players and to make games happen. So,
Well, yeah, and the fact that I didn't realize that you actually had global
oh yeah,
players.
no,
Yeah,
I
which
run
is
games for
really
every
cool.
like all over the place. Yeah.
And that's really really awesome. Something popped in my head about so when you run a game on Zoom,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Are you rolling virtual dice, or do you actually have dice that you
So
like point the camera at and
so so
roll?
I have rules on this. I use real dice. If I'm gonna play D&D, I want to roll dice. It's a tactile
Absolutely,
thing.
I
Like I don't
agree.
want
No, no, I
and
agree.
and I have several house rules, and one of those rules is about cheating, and it's the rule is if you want to cheat, cheat. Because if you're gonna cheat, I don't want to waste my fun time policing people. If
Okay.
it's so important to you that you always succeed in our game of pretend, then you can do whatever you want because if you need that victory, you can have it. Like I spent a lot of my youth running games where
Mhm.
we would come up with intricate ways to make sure no one was cheating
Yep.
and and it would descend into arguments. And I just learned over time that if someone's going to cheat at D&D, they either need the win or there's nothing you can say that's going to stop them. So you just play the game the way you want to play it. But yeah,
Well,
I
yeah,
so
and I was gonna say that, that takes a lot of stress out of the game too, especially if you're,
yeah.
as you're running it, that you're not worried about that one part of it,
Mhm.
which could be a big thing and it can ruin a game.
And what I have learned is over time, people who cheat realize that they take their own fun away.
Mm,
If you always succeed, there's never any conflict, there's never any chance of failure. You just realize that it's not fun
yeah.
because there's no risk that natural 20 you just declared again for the fifth time this game doesn't have the same impact because you didn't get a natural 20. You just wanted the extra damage dice. It's
Yeah.
and I've watched certain players go through that, like especially with the younger ones, because once I tell them like I'm never going to check your dice rolls,
Yeah.
it's amazing how many 20s they roll until they start realizing this isn't fun anymore, or they're afraid they're going to, and then they start rolling for real, and then they actually start having fun because when they hit that nat 20, they light up and it becomes a celebration and stuff like that. So
That's really cool.
yeah,
Now, you run campaigns for kids and adults.
yes.
And I know what you said earlier, like, kids find a lot of creative ways to like do things that adults
Hmm.
don't.
Yeah.
So when you're running games with adults, what do you find like do you what do you find that kind of hinders them from like expanding that creativity?
I One of the big things I see a lot, especially well, for one, kids will always try to opt for the non-violent option. Like, there's a certain age group that this doesn't apply to, but like the younger kids will always try to figure out how not to fight or how
Hmm.
to befriend a monster or find a non-violent, non kind of way to skirt around a problem.
Wow, there's hope for our future.
Yeah, no, it's great. As a DM, it's tough because like I said, like these books are 80% combat rules and like they're
Yes.
trying to and it's great. I'll never be like, you gotta fight this thing. This is,
Hmm.
like it's interesting to hear their logic around it and stuff like that and how they reason it out. Um, and so that in itself is always interesting, trying to figure out when it comes to creating encounters for kids and adults. Just when you create an encounter, um, you want to leave it open-ended. You never
Hmm.
want to come up with a solution in advance, um, because if you once you come up with a solution, you kind of lead that solution, and adults pick that up and immediately go for the solution. Kids will miss it and they'll come up with something you didn't think of, and so you got to be ready for that anyways. So it's always good to leave it open-ended and let them kind of travel the way they want to travel. The other thing you run into, especially like when you get into a combat situation with kids and adults. Adults tend to default to like the Final Fantasy settings, like fight, item, magic, run. Like, and so like that's kind of where their math goes. It's like, okay, which one of these options am I doing? And what do I need to roll to do that? The kids will like they don't see it like that. They have I don't either they haven't played enough RPGs like that. Like, they play
They're not
Pokemon, which
conditioned yet. They're not
like
conditioned to do
yeah, they're
that.
not
Yeah.
conditioned to think, okay, my options are fight, run, or magic. What am I doing?
Yep.
It's like they are more likely to look what's around them and do it. Like I have a couple players who will never do the same action twice. If they hit it with the sword this turn, they are not going to hit it with the sword next turn. They have to figure out something completely different to do.
Okay.
And that's the cool thing about kids, and you really don't want to discourage that. You want to keep them creative, and it's one of the limitations of Dungeons and Dragons is that it has its rule set, and there are other games that have rule sets that work better for that thinking at times. So like,
Okay.
you know, uh, so really you just gotta you gotta roll with it. You gotta make rulings the way they, you know, the key I always do is I always let them uh have the opportunity to succeed. If they come up with some creative, there is always going to be a chance for it to work out, and they're going to gain some benefit from it because nothing,
Mm.
especially to like the younger kids, nothing is more discouraging than like, okay, I attack it, I miss. Okay, your turn's over. Next turn. You always want to kind of give them some inkling of success as you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it also it benefits them to because you allow them to reap a reward for thinking outside of the box, which is
Exactly.
what, which in all honesty, hearing you talk about like the way adults handle it like I feel like it's just as we get older we kind of are conditioned to work within a box. You get a job,
Yeah.
these are this is your job, these are your parameters, this is what you do. You get up
Mhm.
in the morning, you have your morning routine, this is what you do. So it's like as it's just as we grow up, we forget that the options can be, unlimited if we want them to be. We just
Mhm.
get set up in these specific routines. So it doesn't surprise me when you say like that the adult games like they just kind of stick to the basics because
Yeah.
it's kind of like I'll be the first one to admit it. It's like if I was playing D&D right now, that's immediately what I would think of. It'd be like, "Oh, what do you do?" It's like I'm gonna kill it. I mean, like I'm not gonna sit there and wax poetic with it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
no,
be
and
like,
there's
"Hey,
not
let's
nothing
let's
wrong with that. The game is set
yeah,
up like that, and that's the thing too. Is
yeah,
like, especially with the kids that are new, because I teach a lot of beginner kids. This is like their first time ever playing an
hmm
RPG, especially with dice at the table and stuff like that. And I always make sure it's not about what can I do, it's what do you want to do. And
hmm
it's like, tell me what you want to do, we'll figure it out. Don't ask me what you can do because the sheet, it's so like if I tell you what you can do, then you're limited to what I tell you you can do.
correct."
And I think that's where the adult mentality gets into is they look at their sheet and they're like, okay, this is what I can do, and that's it.
Mhm.
And they forget that there's a whole world of imagination they can reach into and pluck ideas from. And that being said, not all adults are like that, but there's it is definitely like
Yeah.
a divide between the two groups for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, and like you said, it's not like it's a bad thing to work
Yeah.
within that realm because the game is built that way, where it's like
Yeah.
the basic parameters of it are, you run or you fight or you use magic or an item, that like those are
Exactly. And
yeah.
a lot of times you're just there to relax and have fun with your friends and tell stupid jokes while you roll dice. And choosing to hit the thing is an easy option. You don't have to like write a novel about how you're going to jump from the chandelier and kick a barrel into the guy's head and you know.
I used to love doing stuff like that. I
Oh
remember
yeah.
like yeah, it's like what's around the room that I could use,
Yes. And
That's
that's
always fun.
something that's the best part about it because like video games have never been able to emulate that yet. They're still a long way off. I mean, AI might come along, but it's still a bit of a ways from letting you be
Yeah.
that creative in a video game.
So you said you run like 7 or 8 games a week, right?
Yeah.
Um, do you run like the same stories in some of the groups? Like do some of the kids' stories actually get played out with adults? So you
Yes.
and okay, so
Yeah.
and I'm assuming you get two completely different results in there.
Yes. Yes, that's actually part of the fun of it. I have
Yeah.
an intro story that I run every group through when they're first learning because I've built it in a way that lets me make sure they understand how all the mechanics work and all that and
Mhm.
they get a feel for all the different styles of play. Like I have like theater of the mind section where we don't look at any maps or anything. We just kind of discuss and talk about it in our heads and have our imaginations play out the game. And then I have a mapped dungeon they go through where we get to play on a tabletop. And yeah, watching the different groups go through the same paths, but seeing how they go differently is great because it lets me know what the next story is going to be or how these guys want to play or how they, what really interested them and what kind of made them get bored. So, but yeah, I have about 10 stories right now that I have interchanged them through and writing about 10 more that they're going to be going through again. Like, but it's all kind of this next set is more sandboxy where they're going to be able to pick where they go and
Okay.
decide like things like that.
Yep. Now, are all of the stories 100% your own making, or do you build off of previously
Yeah,
created
they're
stuff?
all 100% my making. They're all
Nice.
stuff I've come up with.
Have you ever thought about like putting a story together into like a booklet? Like, because people
It,
still create
yeah,
those
yeah,
and they still print and sell them.
yeah, I have put several together in a way where somebody who wasn't me could actually run the game at this
Okay.
point. So, and that's more of the work is like I have my notes and my format I use when I run a game. And that is a little bit different than a format somebody who wasn't me would have to use to run the game.
Okay.
So I've been slowly building that over time. So yeah, there will be a point where I'm going to probably either release them as PDFs online or whatever. Like, but yeah, I will probably end up making them for public consumption. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of anything else we didn't cover. Do you have any specific, yeah, let's end on this. Do you have like any specific moment you can point to where it was like, wow, this was like really awesome, or this was really funny that happened in a game?
Uh, oh man, we there's a lot. Like my gauge for success in a group, like to where I like I don't it's not like watching kids to see if they're engaged and all that stuff. The moment I know I've hooked my players is when they have an inside joke. So
Okay.
like it's a joke that they will all reference back to every campaign we have. And there's a couple. One most recent one we had. They were fighting this wizard up in a library. And they snuck in, they got up on him like while he was asleep in a chair. And they couldn't hit him to save their life. They kept rolling the worst rolls they could. And so I offhandedly said, oh, you sliced the chair. You sliced the chair. You keep hitting the chair and stuff like that. And eventually they beat the guy and we were like laughing because like, oh, the chair is like just a pile, heap of rubble. And the kids out of the blue just decided the chair is the real villain and he's gonna come back for revenge. And the chair, like, it's actually this chair. They're gonna put him back together, and it's gonna be this Frankenstein chair who's coming back for vengeance and leading all these machinations for the every like. So now every plot I run them through, they kind of try to hint back to like,
The
oh,
chair.
the chair must have sent this guy because of this, like, and it so like it it's moments like that where like the kids are tickled by it. They just love
Yeah.
the idea of this chair and like every single group I have little moments like that. Like there was a rat that caught on fire in one, so like they've called the group the Flaming Rats,
Nice.
and like it's
It's
something they
awesome.
go back to all the time, like to the point where like they wanted me to incorporate some kind of like where the rats came back for revenge. So they were fighting so this rat came back like and bribed the gods to for revenge. So he got to come back in like a humanoid rat form that was on fire and got to fight with them. So that's kind of those moments where like if I was running just like a module out of that I bought off a shelf, I couldn't incorporate those it'd be difficult to incorporate those kind of things, but
Yeah.
the nice thing about doing it the way I do is that I can kind of build stories around where they want to go and what they're doing and all that.
That's really awesome. Now I have to ask though,
Yeah.
is the chair going to come back?
Yes, most likely.
All right. I
At
want
least
to, you
that's
know
the main
what?
thing. You
Yeah,
never know. The
exactly.
chair.
Well, you know what? I'm
Yeah.
gonna I'm gonna want to follow up on that.
Yes, I will.
And if the chair does come back, I'd love to hear what happens. So, Adam, this is really awesome. I love hearing all of this. It sounds like a great time. It sounds like a great, ultimately like a great job, you
Yeah,
know.
can't
And
complain.
yeah, and for anybody listening or watching right now that's looking for a DM group,
Mhm.
what's your info? Where can they find you?
Uh, they can reach out to me through email, my at GameCentralCommand at gmail.com. I also have a start playing page. It's start playing. If you look up Game Master Adam, I'm also on there. If I can send you the links. We can.
Yeah, no, 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 definitely. I'll
Mhm.
put the links in the comments box and everything like
Yeah.
that. But okay, that's really cool. So, Really awesome, man. Thank you so much. This has been really great. And when we come back in a couple of moments, we are gonna get to game of the week, and then we're gonna close out our show. So we'll be right back.
Awesome.
All right, guys, welcome back. We're about to close up shop here for this episode, but before we do that, it is time for Game of the Week. And Adam, this is a new thing that I'm doing now for every guest that I have on the show. Rather than me picking the Game of the Week, I want you to pick the Game of the Week for me, and I will live stream that on Thursday night. So.
Okay.
I don't know how much thought you've put into this, or or if I've known you long enough, you're going to probably make me suffer. But what do you got for me?
I'm not going to make you suffer. This is actually like this game is comfort food for me. Like I love like if I have to go back to play a game just to like veg out, uh, I go back to this one. Um, King's Bounty for the Genesis.
King's Bounty for the Genesis. Okay, I do
Yes.
not know this game.
Yeah. It is great because it's roguelike, so every time you play it, it's different.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And the whole idea is you're trying to find, I believe, the lost scepter of the king, and you have to build your armies and conquer castles to do it. And the music might get to you, but I personally love the music. It's very
Okay.
meditative, but
Well,
but
I like meditative music. If it's chill, I'm good with that.
but you'll find out. You'll see
Okay.
if you enjoy it or not. But it is definitely one of my favorite games to play, and just kind of because every time you play it, it's different. So
All right, cool. All
yep.
right, well then you heard it here. I will be playing King's Bounty on Genesis. If you're around on Thursday, I hope you tune in on YouTube and see how terrible I am at the game. It should be very entertaining to say the least. But yeah, for those of you out there who want to play along or join the live stream, that'll be on this Thursday. But would love to hear your thoughts on King's Bounty on the Sega Genesis. And with that, Adam, we are at the end here. This has been an absolutely amazing episode. I
Yep.
cannot thank you enough for joining me,
I had
not just for
fun.
the interview, but for the whole discussion. I thought it was great.
Of course. I enjoyed it. And
Oh, good. I'm glad you did. And if anything, I would love to have you back on, sometime in the future if you're ready, willing, and able.
whenever you want, just ask.
All right. I appreciate that. And then
Cool.
for those of you out there, you guys can find us on Facebook.com/Retro Gamers Podcast, on Instagram at Retro Gamers Podcast, on Twitter, because I'll never call it X, at Retro Gamers Pod. You can listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. You can watch us on YouTube and Spotify at Retro Gamers Podcast. And you can email me at email@theretrogamers.com. One more time, Adam, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. And we will catch you next time on the Retro Gamers Podcast.